And for a moment, please join me in a time of centering. Spirit of love and life, there is so much work to do. We have only begun to imagine justice and mercy. Help us to hold fast to our vision of what can be. May we see the hope in our history, find the courage and the voice to work for that constant rebirth of freedom and justice. That is our dream. Amen.
Amen.
And as we begin, we give thanks that you are here today.
The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was born on January 15th in 1929 in the Jim Crow South of Atlanta, Georgia. He graduated from Morehouse College at the age of 19 with a Bachelor of Arts degree in sociology. Dr. King went on to further his education at Royster Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, where he earned a Bachelor of Divinity degree at the age of 22. And then at the age of 26, he earned yet another degree, which was his PhD in theology from Boston University. Also, while he attended school in Boston, Dr. King met Coretta Scott, who was attending a nearby school called New England Conservatory of Music. Not long after that meeting, she became his wife. In 1960, Dr. King Jr. became a co-pastor of Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta with his father, Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., also known as Daddy King. In addition to being a Baptist minister, Dr. King became the most visible activist, spokesperson, and leader of the civil rights movement from 1955 up until the late 1960s, in which he organized and participated in many action marches. In his final years, he expanded his focus to include opposition towards poverty, capitalism, and the Vietnam War. He was on a mission to address and rid the modern world of an evil that plagued it called poverty. Dr. King said, and I quote, "I choose to identify with the underprivileged. I choose to identify with the poor. I choose to give my life for the hungry. I choose to give my life for those who have been left out of the sunlight of opportunity. I choose to live for those who find themselves seeing life as a long and desolate corridor with no exit sign. This is the way I'm going. If it means suffering a little bit, I'm going that way. If it means sacrificing, I'm going that way. If it means dying for them, I'm going that way because I heard a voice saying, do something for others." So in 1968, Dr. King and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were planning a national occupation of Washington, D.C. to be called the Poor People's Campaign. But tragically, on April 4th of that year, he was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King was only 39 years old. The event was then carried out under the leadership of Reverend Ralph Abernathy. The Poor People's Campaign torch was relit 50 years later in 2018 under the leadership of Reverend William Barber and Liz Theo Harris. The torch is also being carried by each of us who are on this Zoom meeting tonight. Dr. King won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. And in his address, he said, and I quote, "There's nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we had the resources to get rid of it." Now you're going to hear Dr. King speaking in his own words about his personal feelings on poverty in this video.
Millions of young people grow up in the sunlight of opportunity. But that is another America. And this other America has a daily ugliness about it that transforms the buoyancy of hope into the fatigue of despair. In this other America, millions of people find themselves walking the streets in search for jobs that do not exist. In this other America, millions of people are forced to live in dilapidated, substandard housing conditions where they do not have wall-to-wall carpet, but where they all too often have wall-to-wall rats and roaches. In this other America, thousands of young people finish college or high school rather every year reading at an 8th grade or 9th grade level, not because they are dumb, not because they don't have native intelligence, but because the schools are so inadequate, so overcrowded, so devoid of quality, so segregated, if you will, that the best in these minds can never come out. And I guess the most critical problem in the other America is the economic problem. For in this other America, we find some 40 million of our brothers and sisters perishing on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Unemployment is still wide in the black community, and I need not pause to give the figures. They are before us every day. Now, unemployment is not the only problem. Underemployment is just as great or even greater. For most of the poverty-stricken people in our country are working every day, but they are making wages so inadequate that they cannot begin to function in the mainstream of economic life of the nation. They are working, in many instances, full-time jobs for part-time income. Now, because of this economic deprivation, that is a great deal of bitterness, a great deal of despair, a great deal of anger on the part of millions of people in the other America. Somehow we must find the causal basis. Everybody knows that, or who knows me, knows that I'm committed to nonviolence, and I still believe that nonviolence is the most potent weapon available to the Negro in his struggle for freedom and justice. But it is not enough for me to say that. It is not enough for one to stand up and condemn a riot. It is just as necessary for people of goodwill and concern to vigorously condemn the intolerable conditions that continue to exist in our society.
Our next birthday honoree is Mr. Float Like a Butterfly, Sing Like a Bee, the very pretty Muhammad Ali. He was born as Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. on January the 17th, 1942 in Louisville, Kentucky. Mr. Clay made his professional boxing debut in 1960. In 1964, he was a top contender to fight Sonny Liston for the heavyweight championship. Ali won the heavyweight title and deemed himself the greatest. Also in 1964, Cassius Clay, as he had been known, converted to Islam and said that he would change his name to Muhammad Ali, which means the beloved God. He said that Clay was a slave surname that he had not chosen. In March of 1966, Mr. Ali refused to be inducted into the armed forces. He was systematically denied a boxing license in every state and stripped of his passport. As a result, Mr. Ali did not fight from March of 1967 through October of 1970. The court case worked its way through the appeals process before his conviction was overturned in 1971. During this time of inactivity, as opposition to the Vietnam War began to grow, and Mr. Ali's stance gained sympathy, he spoke at colleges across the nation, criticizing the Vietnam War and advocating African-American pride and racial justice. Did you know that Muhammad Ali was designated by the United Nations in 1998 as a UN messenger for peace due to his dedication to justice? There were 6 themes that guided Muhammad Ali's life, and they were respect, confidence, conviction, dedication, giving, and spirituality. Mr. Ali said, and I quote, "In your struggle for freedom, justice, and equality, I am with you. I came to Louisville because I could not remain silent while my own people, many I grew up with, many I went to school with, many my blood relatives were being beaten, stomped, kicked in the streets simply because they want freedom and justice and equality in housing." We lost Muhammad Ali on June 3rd, 2016, due to complications of Parkinson's disease. He was 74 years old. Mr. Ali was more than just a bragger with boasting abilities, but was a prolific rhymer with a specific gift of gab. Here's a small sampling of Mr. Muhammad Ali's creative gift of word usage for humor and social justice purposes in this video.
Last night, I had a dream. When I got to Africa, I had one hell of a rumble. I had to beat Tarzan's behind first for claiming to be the king in the jungle. For this fight, I've wrestled with alligators. I've tussled with a whale. I done handcuffed lightning and put thunder in jail. You know I'm bad. I have murdered a rock. I injured a stone. And I hospitalized a brick. I'm so bad I make medicine sick. I'm so fast, man, I can run through a hurricane and don't get wet. When George Foreman meets me, he'll pay his debt. I can drown a drink of water and kill a dead tree. Wait till you see Muhammad Ali.
The face of truth is open. The eyes of truth are bright. The lips of truth are ever closed, and the head of truth is upright. The breast of truth stands forward. The gaze of truth is straight. Truth has neither fear nor doubt. Truth has patience to wait. The words of truth are touching. The voice of truth is deep. The law of truth is simple. All you sow, you reap. The soul of truth is flaming. The heart of truth is warm. The mind of truth is clear and firm through rain and storm. Facts are only its shadow. Truth stands above all sin. Great be the battle of life. Truth in the end shall win. Life of truth is eternal. Immortal is its past. Power of truth shall endure. Truth shall hold to the last.
So now we come to the third of our 3 birthday celebrations. 70 years ago, this very day, Elijah Eugene Cummings was born in Baltimore, July 18th, 1951. And he attended Baltimore City College and then went to Howard University, where he served on student government. He also graduated in 73 with a bachelor's degree in political science, and then went on to the University of Maryland School of Law and was admitted to the bar after receiving a degree in 1976. He practiced law for nearly 20 years and then moved on to the Maryland House of Delegates and was serving the people since 1996. He was committed to ensuring that the next generation has access to quality health care and education, clean air and water, and a strong economy defined by fiscal responsibility. He said, by providing students in our nation with such an education, we help save our children from the clutches of poverty, crime, drugs, and hopelessness. And we help safeguard our nation's prosperity for generations yet unborn. And in this clip that we'll be showing for him, you'll be hearing what describes his passion, or what gave him his passion. And I think it's something we can all relate to.
Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time to be here. We absolutely appreciate it.
I'm honored to be here. And thank you for that applause. That makes me feel good.
Absolutely.
Amen.
So I wondered if you could kind of give us a status update on where things are.
We must preserve our democracy. That, to me, is number one. We've got to preserve it. And if we're not careful, we will lose it. And I think a lot of people don't realize how much trouble we're in. Even the things that we know for a fact have happened. I cannot think of one person in this whole United States that would not have probably been indicted by now. Not one. Not one. And I've been practicing law. I've been practicing law for a long time. But you know what hurts? What our problem is? We get so caught up in, he's just a flaming progressive from Baltimore City, or he's just a rural Republican from rural, country. We need to throw these labels aside, and we need to concentrate on being Americans. Being Americans. And I really mean that. I mean that because the labels are getting us in trouble. And we are so busy fighting over labels and fighting over party that we forget country. And I think one of the things that has happened is that a lot of people do not even value, they take our democracy for granted.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people, they try to figure out, because maybe they haven't traveled or they haven't seen much in the world, they say, oh God, if we have a hiccup, if I'm not making enough money, if I think somebody has gotten an advantage over me, or if I see people in office that I don't want in office, or there's income inequality, they say, this is horrible. We got to bring somebody in to shake it up. So we bring in somebody to shake it up. And yeah, they shake it up. They shake it up. Mm-hmm. to the detriment of a lot of people. Now, I know you got a lot of questions, but I got to say this. How do you even get out of your lips that you are going to create a situation where you take 27 million people off of health rolls? I don't care who you are, Green Party, whatever, I don't care. There's something wrong with that picture. And let me tell you, I guess maybe it's because of my life. I always say that people ask me, where did your passion come from? My passion comes from pain. It comes from pain. I've seen so much of it. Father deprived of an education, living in South Carolina and told that he had to come out of school in the 4th grade. So his whole life just so upset that he could not get an education. So he made it his business to try to make sure his children were educated. That's painful for me. It's pain to see my grandfather denied medical care and dying the same night that because he couldn't get certain medical care in the day. Pain sitting in special ed, sitting in special ed for years because they say I talk too much. Come on now. I'm serious about this. It's painful. And so that pain drives me. Pain to see my mother on her deathbed. Her last words were not that I love you, Elijah. They were not that I'm proud of you, Elijah. Her deathbed last words was, please do not let them take away our right to vote.
That's
on her
powerful.
deathbed, and then she died.
Well, my grandmother's final words were, please vote for Al Gore. So I think we're kin that way.
We hooked up now. I mean, you got me all excited here, man. It must be this red rug.
Yeah, exactly.
On June 19th in 2019, the Poor People's Campaign hosted our very first Moral Action Congress in Washington, D.C. It was the first of its kind because it was the first time our movement had an opportunity to bring together all of the candidates who were aspiring for national office. And at our Moral Action Congress in DC at Trinity University on June 19th, we had the wonderful pleasure of having Representative Cummings come and be with us. We didn't know that that would be one of our last gatherings that we would be able to be with him. But Congressman Cummings was someone who was a fierce advocate and a fierce champion for us. And tonight we celebrate his legacy. And he is dearly, dearly missed. But we also have with us this evening, Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings. And so I want to introduce to you her right now. Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings' American story is rooted in the core values of hard work, faith, giving back to her community, and never taking rights and opportunities for granted. As the daughter of a 20-year Air Force veteran, military life gave Maya and her family the opportunity to live in diverse communities and the security of access to affordable health care and a quality education. Maya's family was active in their community, the Democratic Party, and their church. Growing up, she was also influenced by her parents' stories about their earlier lives in the Jim Crow South, with separate water fountains and segregated eating areas and segregated schools that closed during harvest season so that Black and brown kids could pick cotton in the fields. And keenly aware of the great sacrifices previous generations made in the face of brutality and a rigged discriminatory system to build a better life for their children, Maya devoted her life's work to honoring the sacrifices of the past by pushing for a more equal and inclusive future that expands opportunities for all. Maya attended Prairie View A&M University and HBCU, where she joined and served as president of the Political Science Club and social action chair of the campus chapter of the best sorority in the entire world, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. Maya went on to receive her master's and PhD in political science from Purdue University, specializing in public policy, international relations, American politics, and African American studies. During her studies, Maya developed her vision about harnessing the power of government and public policy to advance solutions that expand opportunities for people and communities. But what we also love about her is that she is the love of our fearless hero's life, Elijah Cummings. And his legacy is what we celebrate here tonight. So may I introduce to some and present to others, Dr. Maya Rockeymoore Cummings.
Thank you so much for having me tonight. I want to congratulate the Poor People's Campaign of Maryland for all of the excellent and hard work you do to uplift the need to close discrimination and economic apartheid in the United States of America, to address the huge gaps that we have in economic security, and find ways to advance an agenda that uplifts economic opportunity for all. And so I just want to say thank you for being a people of the people, for being servants to the cause, for actually being the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and Elijah Cummings and so many others. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart and on behalf of your hero, Elijah Cummings, because he would say thank you and start his speech off and his remarks off with the same thing.
Yes.
So, Reverend Angela, I just want to say I appreciate your introduction as well. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Maya, it is so good to have you here with us this evening. It's so good to be able to talk to you. You know, this is more than anything, this would be a time that I would love to hear what Elijah would be thinking right about now, especially about what's been going on and what has recently happened in recent days. I'm reminded that on August 6th, back in 1965, that was when the Civil Rights, the Voting Rights Act was passed. And then to have that juxtaposed with January 6th, 2021, with the unrest that and the just insurrection that happened in the Capitol, I'm curious as to your thoughts about this, what seems like a vacuum in leadership in Capitol Hill. What do you think Elijah would have said about these times?
So he already said it. He said it in his book, We're Better Than This.
Yeah.
We are better than this. He spent the last year of his life working furiously on this book because he wanted to warn you all that Donald Trump was no good. He wanted to warn the American people that we were in danger. And he predicted that Donald Trump was going to actually try to tear our democracy apart brick by brick. What he did not predict was that it was going to the attempt was going to be done before Donald Trump left office. He also didn't predict, and he wrote this book because he wanted to beg the American people not to vote for him. He imagined in his mind that the way that it would go down was that Donald Trump would, by hook or by crook, and I emphasize the word crook, that he would find his way into a second term in office. And that he would then begin to systematically dismantle, all of the elements of our rule of law, our Constitution, certainly democratic norms. We'd already seen it happening in terms of his first term. He was disregarding all of these things left and right. He was using the legal system to rope-a-dope, because we just talked about Muhammad Ali. So let's talk about rope-a-dope. People who actually use systems not to actually get to accountability or the truth, but to avoid accountability and to avoid the truth. And so Elijah wrote in this book, it was a warning. Do not trust Donald Trump. He is not trustworthy. And he was fearful for our democracy. He was fearful for humanity. In the book, he talks about how, his oversight over what was happening at the southern border of the United States made him realize clearly that this Trump administration and that Donald Trump had a streak of cruelty, and that not only was our democracy at stake, but so was our humanity. And so, Elijah, if he would have been alive on January 6th, he would of course been furious, but he would have absolutely said accountability, and we're better than this. We've got to move forward, but we've got to hold these folks accountable, every single one of them, and anybody out there who thinks that insurrection and the overthrow of the United States government is the way to their preferred agenda and their source of power. That is absolutely not how our democracy works.
One of the things that we loved the most about Elijah was that he could be counted on as one of the very few voices that would champion the rights of the poor, who would always take up the banner and champion those who were the least of these. He always fought for the least of these. How do you think we can make our current representatives in Congress be more like Elijah?
Well, let me just take you back to, Elijah, and I'm sitting, in the house that he bought almost 40 years ago right now. And it is in the heart of West Baltimore. I walk out this door and I see every ill that you can imagine, from addiction to deep poverty to gun violence. It's all here, right here in West Baltimore. And when many people fled from this community, he decided to stay, because for him, it was a reminder of the work that must be done. It was the impetus for him to, basically go to work on Capitol Hill, every day, first in the Maryland State Legislature, but then in US Congress, to remain dedicated and focused on the needs of those who have been left out and left behind. He believed firmly that that is the mission of government, to meet the needs of people, not, of course, we've been perverting government to meet the needs of rich people, taking all of the resources of our nation and basically subsidizing the wealth of people who already have obscene levels of wealth. Yeah. And Elijah believes strongly that we need to actually first meet the needs of those who have the least. And so he went to work every day, just dedicated to doing what he could. And let me just say this, it wasn't just about living in West Baltimore. It was about growing up poor. It was about being an outsider within, about being born an African-American man in the Jim Crow South, about knowing what it was like to be poor because he was poor, and wanting to do everything in his power to help other people in the situation that he and his family were once in, to lift them out and to lift them up and to give them the opportunities to be everything that they can be. There are no throwaway people in our country, and he believed in that strongly.
Yeah, and that Baltimore was a city that meant so much to Elijah. And even just yesterday, I just got word about another fighter of Baltimore, or for Baltimore, losing his life, Dante Barksdale. Mm-hmm. What do you think Baltimore can, how can Baltimore just be able to survive the massive amounts of, just speak to that? Because for me, I have no words for just what's going on right now.
So I called it a hope agenda. Baltimore's surviving, but it's not thriving. And it needs to be thriving. Every single person in Baltimore City needs to be thriving. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be. There's no reason why we shouldn't be, except for the fact that we do not have the political will. We do not have the public will to drive the political will. to make sure our policymakers do the right thing in terms of investing in disinvested communities, getting the programmatic and the policy strategies in place that are equitable, that make sure that the resources, but also the design of policy and programs are shaped in a way that are targeted to meet the needs of those who have been left out and left behind. And so, with that, Baltimore needs hope. And I'm not saying this in terms of a cute little slogan that our former president used.
Yeah.
I'm using it as an acronym. And let me get this right. The H stands for healthy and safe communities. We need healthy and safe communities. That means access to universal, and I'm so sorry, Obama, but I'm not talking Obamacare halfway measures. I'm talking about every single person has access to healthcare. Now, with that, I'm personally a single payer universal healthcare person. I always have been. I have been for the last 20 plus years. And so, we fought for a public option during the Obamacare era. And it looks like that's where we're heading actually in this next iteration of how to improve the Affordable Care Act. And if that gets us to 100% of the people covered, okay. I know that there are going to be improvements beyond that. But what we need to do is and if the coronavirus hasn't shown us anything, it is that we all need access, because anybody that doesn't have it is a threat and a danger to everybody else. In terms of healthy, safe communities, gun violence is terrible. It's absolutely terrible. And yes, we need, gun control measures. There's no reason why people should be walking around with semi-automatic weapons like we're in Iraq or in Afghanistan. This is the United States of America. We don't need to be shooting people with semi-automatic weapons, and we don't need to be shooting people, period. But, so gun control measures are important, but so is addressing the root causes. And one of the root causes of gun violence is poverty. A lot of the gun violence in Baltimore is driven by economics. And so when we focus on boosting the quality of our education, making sure that the basic human needs and economic needs of the public are met in ways that don't drive them to desperate measures, making sure that our kids and adults have a school-based and community-based access to violence prevention, anger management, trauma supports, psychological assistance, that they have all of a wraparound, needs met. Then we get to the real nature of the solution. And that is taking a holistic approach to this and making sure that we're holistic and targeted in terms of providing an opportunity for people to thrive. And that's just the H in hope.
Right. That is, I'm so thankful that we've been able to have you with us this evening. One of the beautiful parts about, and that I always appreciated about Elijah Cummings, is that whenever we called, he answered. He picked up the phone and he answered our call. And so for that, we are indebted to him in a way that we could never repay, for him to be such a champion. And we are glad to see that you are picking up the battle and the baton and running the race and continuing in that vein. Thank you so much for coming this evening and being with us and sharing with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And again, thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you. Thank you. And you know what? To piggyback on some of the things that you were speaking about, we are going to lift now what we call what the Poor People's Campaign calls its 14-point policy. In the spirit of Elijah Cummings, in the spirit of all those who went before us and have come before us and have fought and keep fighting for us, we are putting forth and have put forth to the Biden administration a 14-point policy priority that we feel that the Biden administration should pick up in the first 100 days of its administration. And so right now we want to kind of share with you those 14 policy points. They can be found on our national website, the 14 policy priorities to heal the nation, a moral and economic agenda for the first 100 days. And so in that, we're asking that our administration, the new administration, focus on these first things, these first significant and important policies that will provide relief to so many of us who are really are just experiencing the worst of this pandemic in so many different ways. First being enacting comprehensive, free, and just COVID-19 relief. Many of the people who are facing COVID-19 head on and are bearing the brunt of the deaths that have occurred in our nation have been those on the front line. And many of those who are on the front line are the poor. And so we want to see comprehensive, free, and just COVID-19 relief, not only in the form of vaccines and things of that nature, but also, as we have here in our policy, we want to see all kinds of COVID relief. That means treatment, testing, rent freeze, mortgage moratoriums. We want to see resources to help keep hospitals, rural hospitals in alive and still thriving. We want to see OSHA standards protecting health workers and first responders. We want to see a suspension of ICE and CBP enforcement so that people can feel safe to be in the streets and to know that undocumented persons should not have to feel threatened in terms of being able to be alive. We want to see support for public schools. We want to see student debt relief. We want to see moratoriums on utility shutoffs and credit without credit penalties. We want to see food programs be expanded like SNAP and WIC. We want to see all kinds of COVID relief that does not just look like the COVID vaccine, but we want to see it in all forms, help all of the nation to provide relief. So that's the first part of our 14-point policy. The second point policy was guaranteed quality health care for all, regardless of any pre-existing condition. We want to see the minimum wage raised to $15 an hour now. Point blank, period, hard stop. Now, not in 2 years, not in 3 years, not gradually phased in time. And one of the things that we like to think about when we think about the $15 wage is that $15 is what will bring up our national standard to the point where you can just get to a place of surviving. It still doesn't do what it needs to do, but $15 is at the bare minimum what it needs to be. And we look at it as from this standpoint. If you were drowning in the ocean and a ship came along to throw you a life raft, you would not want part of your life raft now, and then the next piece of your life raft in 2 years, and then another part in 3 years from now, gradually phased in over time. No, you're drowning now. You're dying now. You need the assistance and help now. And so that's what we're asking for. We're also asking for an update to the poverty measure. COVID-19 has already exposed the poverty myth that goes on in this country and has really brought forward poverty in a way that the American consciousness had not been paying attention to. And so we think that that antiquated poverty measure needs to be updated, because in the light of COVID-19, it is even worse than before what our poverty measure was in this country. We want to see guaranteed quality housing for all. And in that, we want to say that all foreclosures and evictions, especially here in Maryland, be frozen in terms of rent, and stopping all increases in rent and mortgage cancellation. We want to see those types of things, because even if you forego or stall the rent payments or mortgage payments, and then say at the end of 6 months, say they're all due, guess what? There's a lot of people who still aren't going to be able to pay that amount. So we're kicking it down the can. We're kicking the can down the road. What we'd like to see is to enact a way for the proof of renters and the burdens of households that are facing eviction be alleviated. We want to see a federal jobs program built up for investments in infrastructure, public institutions, things of that nature that would benefit poor and low income communities. We want to see and finally demand protection and expansion of the Voting Rights and Civil Rights Act. We want guaranteed, safe, quality, equitable public education with supports for protection against resegregation. A lot of the efforts that have been floating around in these days under the guise of choice for schools really amounts to just a resegregation of our schools. And we want to see those efforts reversed. Comprehensive and just immigration reform, no kids in cages. We want to see enaction of fair taxes. We want to see ensuring the rights of all Indigenous people. And if I could go a step further, I would like to personally see some of those rights of our Indigenous brothers and sisters, their sacred worship spaces, be given back to them. We want to see the use of power of executive orders. And we want to see those executive orders, we want to see executive orders meet immediate demands. We want to see the redirection of this bloated Pentagon budget toward those priorities. The Pentagon always finds and always gets money for whatever it needs. But then yet at the same time, when it's time for money to be spent on the poor and low income communities, there's no money. Many of our programs that are directed in avenues of militarism should be redirected toward benefits for the poor. And then lastly, we would like to see the Biden administration work with the Poor People's Campaign to establish a permanent presidential council to advocate for this bold agenda. There is no agenda without accountability. And we would like to see the Biden administration and all administrations after that put their money where their mouth is and enact a presidential council to guide and help give voice to poor and low income persons, to make our voices heard and have a seat at the table. That's what we're asking for. And so in the chat, you can also go to the Poor People's Campaign website to find that information. It's there and available for everyone to be able to see. But by the same token, if you are interested, there is also that information available in a PDF form for you to distribute amongst your friends, and to be able to share amongst everyone, for you to be able to know what our policy platform is, and for you to be able to advocate that your local representatives encourage the Biden administration and all other administrations to do the same. We have to fight with one voice and fight as if our life depends on it, because it very well does.
It does. Absolutely. So I don't think there's a thing that's listed here that I'm not in agreement with. And so I just want to say thank you for the specificity. This is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about policy design and being specific about what the equity measures are. And so thank you so much for taking the time to put the agenda together, and anything I can do to help, also push it, not just with my, local representative, but also with the president and the vice president. I will do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to that end, I want to segue one more, make another segue to asking the members who are of the Poor People's Campaign who are on the call for tonight. We've got some homework for you to do, and particularly those who are in Districts 1 and District 4. When the insurrection of tyranny occurred on the 6th, one of our very own representatives, Andy Harris, signed on to participate in the sedition. So we are asking that Mr. Harris, since he doesn't believe in democracy, since he wants to support the efforts of those who want to overthrow the government, we're asking that he resign. And so we're asking for those persons who belong to District 4 and District 1, you have some homework. We would like you to join in us in helping us write a letter writing campaign to Andy Harris to ask him to step down. First of all, he said he was only going to run for, he wasn't going to seek yet another term. He wasn't going to go past 6 terms or whatever he's done so far. And now he's gone back on that. And since he's gone back on the Constitution of the United States, he's gone back and turned his back on the poor, he's turned his back on his oath of office, we need to turn him back and let him and relieve him of his duties. So if you are in District 4, we are asking you, and District 1, as you can see on our screen, if you live in those neighborhoods, if you live in those areas, we want you to join our letter writing campaign. And so we are, if you look in our chat, there is a letter, a template for you to be able to access and use, for you to be able to call on not only Andy Harris, but Delegate Cox. We're asking both of them to resign because they are not worthy of the seat that they hold, because they're not looking out for us as the people. So we want to encourage those persons who live in those areas to participate in that campaign. And this is the time, people, this is the time for us to get involved and take back our democracy and hold our elected officials accountable. Now's the time. We got to unseat these people, because if they're not willing to serve us in the way that we need him to serve, then it's time for them to, as Carol Burnett would say, so gone.
So long and so gone.
So long. Farewell. We're so glad we had this time together.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your leadership. I'm all for it. And I saw in the chat that somebody said whoever runs against Harris. I actually saw that there are going to be several candidates, so you're going to have to select who you support. But that being said, I'm all for your call, and thank you for your leadership.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Maya. So now we're going to move forward on to Susan Allen. Susan Allen is going to share with us some information about to support our housing agenda. This moratorium on the rent and moratorium on evictions is only gathering steam for what will be a tremendous crisis in Maryland. So we want to hear from Susan on that front. Susan?
Great. Our housing subgroup has been meeting for a number of months now to plan for what we can do during the current session, the 442nd session of the Maryland General Assembly. So our housing subgroup is working on the 5th policy, guaranteed quality housing. for the state of Maryland. And fortunately, unlike Harris and some of our other legislators, we do have some very fine senators and delegates who are really trying to ensure quality housing. So I wanted to also start with the remembrance of Dr. King and his statements about poverty and his passion for secure and safe housing for every American. And this is a 1957 picture, and I think you'll probably recognize some of the people, including Miss Rosa Parks, who is sitting there supporting his poverty agenda. And here is what he said in his Nobel Peace Prize: "There is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it." And we can say that in Maryland, we have more resources now than we've had in a long time in our state legislature. So we have evidence for supporting the eviction and foreclosure bills that are in the Maryland Assembly this year. And they're very specific. One thing that our subgroup has learned is that sometimes these seem pretty piecemeal because otherwise these bills cannot be passed. There's too much opposition to them from real estate lobbyists and other people who simply do not want to have rental housing and mortgages controlled in our state. So we might be looking at a lot of bills this year. So I'm going to be calling, our subgroup will be calling on you to show up and to help us support a lot of bills. But first of all, Maryland does not do very well in either the foreclosure or eviction prevention area. We are really always in, it seems like, the top 10 of the worst states in foreclosures and evictions. So according to the US Census Bureau, very recently, 19.4% of Marylanders face serious risk of foreclosure. So this is almost 1 in 5 people. And this means that at least 68,000, almost 70,000 families are at risk. And I'm sure that these statistics are underrepresented. We never can fully count the number of people who are being forced out by their landlords, and these are these never go to court, these cases. So this is just the tip, I think, of the iceberg. So here is one of our major bills to protect against foreclosure. It's called the Homeowners Relief Act of 2021, and Delegate Stewart and Senator Carter are the sponsors of this bill. It is a very big bill, and a hearing on this bill is coming up very quickly, so we will be asking you to come to a hearing. If this is your delegate or senator, we'd like you to write to them and say, please actively support. We know you wrote this bill and we are in support of it. So it will extend the foreclosure moratorium well into 2021, beyond when Hogan tells us the state of emergency is no longer in effect. And remember, these moratoriums affect only housing that is sponsored by the FA and the FHA. Mortgages that are going through just regular banks or other lending institutions are not protected against the foreclosure moratorium unless those banks voluntarily agree, or those mortgage servicers. So it's going to require those mortgage servicers to allow the homeowners to pause or reduce their payments. I think you already talked about that, Reverend Angela, and to establish a default repayment option. Because what do? We all know you can't pay, and then suddenly you're required to pay all of the back missing payments, whether you're a renter or whether you're have a mortgage. And there is going to also be a work group on increasing home ownership in the state by Delegate Learman. Our subgroup doesn't have enough information on that, but we really think many more people need the option of buying in order to build wealth. These are some of the 2021 bills against rental evictions. This is an even more severe threat right now. And Delegate Fisher has put out a fairly broad bill, HB 50, the Tenant Protection Act of 2021, needed right away to make allowing tenants to have their utility charges prorated or perhaps suspended, requiring landlords to provide documentation for materials and services used when they actually are saying, you owe me so much out of your deposit, out of your security deposit, because I've had to make all these repairs, when actually that money has not been spent for repairs. Allowing tenants associations to use meeting rooms. Tenant associations have become much more active to prevent evictions. Tenants are withholding rent in escrow to protest their neighbors being evicted. So it's a very powerful strategy. Allowing tenants to break lease if they're victims of stalking. That seemed like a no-brainer to me, but we need an actual bill for that. And to allow a therapist or other professional to certify that the tenant is a victim of stalking or abuse. Rather than just statements by police officers or judges. So these items have come directly out of tenant requests. There are other eviction bills that are coming up. My delegate, Shanika Henson, has asked for our support for HB 112, which seals eviction records. So if you are evicted, that record cannot follow you every time you want to rent a new apartment. It will just be closed. And Shanika will be having a hearing and has asked us to attend. There is HB 18 and SB 154, eviction right to have counsel when you're having an eviction hearing. And our Brian Frosch, our Attorney General, is backing this bill. Will be one of the most effective that will be passed. SB 130, there'll be a limit on rent that you have to pay during emergencies. So you're not ending up with a $10,000 bill that you can't pay at the end of the emergency. And SB 38, we have a specific Anne Arundel County bill, which is my county, to prevent evictions. So those are bills currently. There will be more bills coming along. These are just the ones that were pre-filed before the opening. We have 90 days yet to go. And the actions that our committee, our housing subgroup is recommending is that we distribute Maryland Foreclosures Overview by Beth Jacobson that we're working on. Mike is working on finishing up. We'll have 2 videos, one short, one longer, explaining what the Maryland foreclosure situation is and how people can be protected. And we want to use that at meetings and have that available on YouTube. And then we want to have testimony and specifically watch parties for these bills. So the first watch party will take place on January 26th at 1:30 p.m. and there will be another one a few days later. So we'll be in touch with you about showing up for these watch parties. So that's our current plans, and we will definitely have more as we go through the 90-day session. Okay, thank you.